So let me tell you a story about when I was 16 in the jungles of Honduras. When I was, I guess, just before I turned 16, my dad was talking about this lost city in the jungles of Honduras and how we, my brother and I, we were teenagers, should go down to Honduras and look for this lost city of the jungles. And of course, we invited a couple of our teenage friends to go along and thought, what a great adventure. We're going to be like Indiana Jones. We're going to go down. We're going to find this lost city. We're going to be on Johnny Carson, the show at the time, and we'll be famous. And of course, we went down. This was the summer of 1976. We went down to Honduras. On our flight down there, we arrived in La Ceiba. Then we took a little teeny plane with a guy named Captain Crash. And that in and of itself should have told me to get the hell out of there and head back home. But I didn't have a choice. So we get on a plane, we go with Captain Crash. He flies over this teeny little village in the coast of Honduras just to get the cows and stuff off the runway, which was a grass field. We land on the field and we get there and we go, shit, now what do we do? The idea was to go in and ask the local Indians and the people that live there to tell us where this lost white city was or where they found certain things. Now, the legend was there, but nobody wanted to tell us because there was a story, at least from the Indians, that if you entered the White City, you would die a violent death. So nobody would take us anywhere near it. They would just point and say, it's up, at the end of that river and this river where they meet and up in the mountains. And we're like, okay, that doesn't tell us much. So we spent the summer in Honduras looking for a lost city, but, we probably walked over the top of it a time or two because it was so overgrown and so difficult to trek through those jungles and miserable because it was raining all the time and we were always hungry and we didn't have food and there were flash floods in the rivers and, we ended up miserable and happy as hell to go home. Now, the one story, and I'll give you, is perspective. On the way to Honduras as a 16-year-old boy, the flight attendant, short, little, round flight attendant, not very attractive, On the way back, we had the exact same flight crew, same woman. She was beautiful, smelled good, looked good. I mean, it's all 2 months in the jungles with, 5 other guys. Your perspective changes when you come back. So that was the story as a kid, figuring out, or better said, appreciating the little things in life like water and shelter and food and, life.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast. I asked Henry to do the lead-in instead of me starting because, as you know, the traits of the kangaroo matter. Kangaroos can physically only move forward in life. They have to navigate that way. And we like to have leaders on that have showed courage, have showed continuous learning, and all of the attributes that it takes to navigate life. And so that's just one story from Henry. I think you're really going to enjoy this podcast. Henry, thanks for being on. Thanks for being part of the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast. You've got a lot to tell us. You've got some exciting, brand new stuff in your life that you want everybody to know about. But I'm not going to let you off the hook because you just left us on an airplane with a whole different perspective about life and a flight attendant on back at that time. That could have been Eastern Airlines or TWA. So we're dating ourselves here. So your dad says, go find a city. You talk 4 other guys into going with you, obviously. You go down to Hondo land, and as we military guys affectionately call it Hondo. As you go to Hondo and you get out there and you start doing your thing, and now you're on your way back on an airplane. But that starts a whole level of, it probably changes your confidence. It probably makes you look at life differently. It probably makes you things that you would have thought are impossible seem easy. And you did it early. Some of us have that experience at 30, some of us at 40, some of us never really get that whole, boy, I jumped in it. I didn't know if I was going to get malaria. I never want to see another mosquito again. Bad water's bad water. And when you get back to the world, you have a whole different appreciation. So I'll leave it there. You take us on the journey, brother.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And ironically, you mentioned the military. So we didn't know anything about surviving. We were kids living in suburbia USA, right? And so Dad had read about this guy who was an ex-Marine. My dad was an ex-Marine as well, who was familiar with Honduras. He was a snake hunter, right? So he reached out to him. He never met the guy, never met him in person. And he said, listen, you know where the White City goes? Yeah, of course, which was bullshit. because he wanted to get a free ride to get out there, because what his goal was in going in and out was snake hunting. He would get these fer de lances, these
Oh, sure.
very
Yeah.
venomous snakes. Yeah. And go hunting for them. So, he was a bit of a whack job, because at some point when he heard the legends, he says, if we ever find this white city and it's got the monkey faces of gold and you find all this gold, I will make you swim across the river. And if you're struggling, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to take the gold. So here we are as kids, and he's got the gun and we don't, and we have knives, right? And machetes. So we thought, we need to figure out a plan to kill this guy before he kills us, right? We literally had figured out, one night we are going to figure, if something happens, we had a plan to kill the guide, right? And it was like, you look back and you're like, this was Lord of the Flies shit.
There was some Charlie Sheen Apocalypse Now kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. But we found out later, this was years later, the guy was actually arrested because he used to get these big cribos, these large boa constrictor type snakes, like, 8-10 feet long, huge. He would kill them, fill them with cocaine, and put some of the dangerous fer de lances on the top. So guys open the crates, they see these bucket of snakes and these things, and they're not going to go in and mess with it. But in the bottom of the thing are a couple of big snakes filled with coke, and that's how he smuggled coke into the country.
Genius.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this was the 70s, right? So this was the day where, in South Florida, that's where everything happened.
That's right. That's amazing.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. You do get back and you realize, shit, it's not the little pristine suburbia world that we've come to know and love. It's another world out there.
Well, tell me before you go on, because there's a lot here, Henry. But talk to me a little bit about, and this is a digression. So as I tell everybody, we may end up down a rabbit hole we didn't intend to. But I talked to a lot of people. It took me a long time not to look down my nose, because when I would come out of combat and I would get back in the straight civilian world, everything's ridiculous. Everybody is we live in a world of overabundance. Everybody has no appreciation for the basic things. And when you have a thing like a global pandemic called COVID that it could, kill millions of people in your country, we're all running to the store to get toilet paper. So if anal cleanliness is where our hierarchy of needs kind of lands in a disaster, we're living in a pretty damn good place. And sometimes you don't have a full appreciation for that or how to navigate it until you go to some place that really absolutely sucks.
I got to say, I think that we have, for the most part, not everybody, of course, I'm not going to generalize, but for the most part, we have a terrible sense of entitlement in this country where we think we deserve shit, right? They shouldn't have. We should. I want more money. I want more benefits. I want to work from home. I want to do all. Wait a second. Hang on. There are people in other countries raising their hand and saying, look, I'll work twice as hard for half as much. But we don't want that. We want to pay less money. Oh, that's what they do over there. We don't want that. We want to pay ourselves more and we want shit cheaper. Wait a second. It doesn't work. We don't get it. And that's the challenge. I think when you look at the numbers, I don't know what the statistics are of Americans, U.S. citizens that have a passport that have even left this country is startling, right? And I think if more people could get out and travel and appreciate what else is out there and how other people live, I think they'd have much greater gratitude for just living a humble middle-class American life.
I appreciate you going there. I mean, you could have taken that any way you wanted to, but I appreciate you going there for a couple of reasons. One is I think it actually ties to your story and this kangaroo leadership theory that I try to wrap things around, because kangaroos understand their limitations and they use it as a strength, but they have to use their head to overcome their big feet. And when you get out and start moving around and take on things that are fearful and look like they're loaded with pain, there's 10,000 reasons why not to do it. But the growth. And so you're 16. You go down there. Okay, 2 months. So you spend 2 months in the jungle. So I have a jungle story too. It's not similar. We weren't looking for the White City. We were just looking for drug runners. The guy with the boa constrictor.
There you go.
So I totally get it. I totally get what you're talking about. and I can feel the humidity, and I can feel the bugs and everything that goes along with that, and the torrential rains that start about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're just brutal. So I get all that, but you're 16
Yeah.
and you come back, so now you've got some tools in your toolkit that some of us don't get until we're older. What do you do with them? What'd you do?
I don't think that this was summer break from high school, mind you. So, that was the summer in Honduras, which is also the rainy season, which was horrible. I don't know that as a 16, I fully acknowledged or understood the effects, right? It was just, yeah, some crappy ass experience, great stories for the summer, and, life goes on, right? I end up going to college in Arizona. And, I think one of the things that looking back that it helped, besides the gratitude and appreciation for just the basic things, I mean, water and a burger, oh my God, it was more the tenacity, just keep going, right? Wash, rinse, repeat, if you will, in business. Repeat, don't give up, right? And try to go through and complete what you've started. The hardest challenge, I think, was we didn't get to find what we thought we wanted to find. And for that matter, 40 years went by and nobody has since found it. But a couple of years ago, some guys went out with some LiDAR, this radar detecting underneath the canopy, and claims to have found some mounds where the lost city was. But it's so hard to get in there and so inaccessible. You can't drop people in, you can't bulldoze in. So it's very difficult to even uncover it. You can say, here it is. Getting there to do any excavation is the challenge now. So maybe they did find it. I guess we'll find out in the coming years.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
So moving on, I think the reality is those lessons are only embedded or realized later as you go through, and you don't realize that that's part of your psyche. That's just there,
mhm. So so interesting. So you were 16, so you're probably going into your junior. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're probably going into your junior high school, and you come back. What do you do with that? I mean, somebody's going to ask what you do during the summer, and then you're going to tell them a story, and they're not going to believe you. But that's all
Yeah.
fun too.
Well, basically, we were somewhat travelers to begin with. My dad worked in the airline industry. He was in the travel business, and my mom used to like to travel. So anytime we had an opportunity in high school, we would take the summer off and travel. So it wasn't unusual for us to go somewhere. It was more unusual to go somewhere where nobody's been. Hey, we went to Europe. Yeah, okay, that's nice. I'll do that. But no, hey, we went to the jungles of Honduras where friggin' nobody goes. And the first time when we landed, the Indians had never seen blonde hair, right? So they come up to my brother and I, who are blonde as can be, and they're touching our hair, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's so amazing! I never this, it's like something out of an alien race, never seen before, and that type of thing." So it was an adventure to get to a place where people had almost had no contact with the real world. And again, 1976, there really wasn't a lot of communication. There were no phone systems, there's no internet, there's no satellite stuff to get connected. It didn't exist.
No, you just kind of did what you did, and your parents
Yep.
didn't know what you didn't talk to your dad probably for the whole 2 months. So,
Yeah, we
um,
were we were thinking at some point, Dad just wanted to get rid of us. He doesn't want to pay for us to go through college. He sent us out here to die. And we really believe it.
get bit by a snake. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure you made up all kinds of stuff. So you graduate high school, go on to college, and then the story just gets more amazing, Henry.
Well, this one's a story of hedonistic, opportunistic entrepreneurship because I'm in college. At the time, I'm addicted to Pac-Man, the video game machine, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in a laundromat. I'm a sophomore in college. I'm sitting in a laundromat. I have a pocket full of quarters. I'm staring at the clothes going around in the dryer, and I'm thinking, man, I really wish there was a Pac-Man game in here because I don't want to study. And so I thought, instead of thinking that, I should just call all I go back, I get the yellow pages. I call every laundromat in Tucson, where I went to college, the University of Arizona. So, do you guys have video game machines? They'd say no. And eventually I started saying, would you like some? Right? And a few said yes. And I said, because, I'll share the revenue. I don't know why I said that, because I didn't have any money. And I took my tuition monies and I went to an auction in Phoenix. and I bought these used machines because they used to have these games in the arcades, and then in the back of the arcade were machines that nobody wanted to play, and they're just taking up space. They'd get rid of them at auctions, and they'd sell them for less than cost, right? And so we bought them just to put them in and fill space in the laundromat. Well, I bought one, fill space in the laundromat. Eventually, in a couple of months, it paid itself back. And then we bought another one, and we bought another one, and we kept moving them around so people wouldn't go, oh man, this is a piece of junk, right? They'd come back a couple of weeks later, and there's a new one. And they're like, oh, they figured out that this is a piece of junk too, right? So that was kind of the sort of entrepreneurial bug. It's like, I can do something that I enjoy, and there's an opportunity because nobody was doing this. And I have a captive audience, right? They're going to sit there and do nothing, or they're going to feed this stupid machine with quarters. So the only thing it didn't do is I thought I was doing it to help my addiction to play video game machines. But every time I went in and somebody was playing, I couldn't take away and steal quarters from my business to play my game. So I never really got a chance to do that.
Don't get high on your own supply, right? So funny.
Exactly.
Funny.
So that was the on thing. And then I decided, okay, now I'm going to move to Los Angeles and pursue my dream of producing and directing movies. So I was smart enough to sell the business and have them pay me a couple of bucks every month for 2 years, just so that I can, survive and not get one lump sum and as a kid spend it stupidly and then be out of money. Then I go to LA, I'm on a game show, and I make some more money. And I'm like, wow, this is great. I don't do much except blow it all on stupid things. And
okay,
parties.
So what game show, Henry?
So it's called Press Your Luck. It's the second show that ever aired. And I'm on the show, and I'm losing. And the woman who's winning decides, you know what? I don't want to risk it. I got enough. I'm going to pass my spins to the loser over here, Henry. And I get 3 spins. I end up getting, no whammies, as the game show is.
Yeah, I remember the game.
Yeah, and ended up winning. Couldn't believe it. So, $8,000 later, I think it was 83 or something. That was a lot of money. So I could live for a while with $8,000. But yeah, Press Your Luck. And then they revived the show just a few years ago. It was
nice.
Strange to see again. It was almost the same thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So what made you move to California, to LA?
So my dream was to get into the film and television business. I wanted to produce and direct movies. Right? Sure. That was the goal.
Did you have this dream as a young kid?
No, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect because I liked design. Okay. I took a course in drafting, and I realized, you needed math. This is, again, before computers. And I thought, oh my God, math. And what? For the plumbing and the electrical. I'm like, this is not, no. After Honduras, we were sent back to Honduras with an ABC Sportsman film crew to film the journey that we took. And the guy, his name was Mark. He was a young guy, he was 24. He was directing the group. They were having fun. They were traveling. And I thought, this is what I want to do, right? I'm going to get into the film business. And so, of course, I go to Los Angeles. I don't get into the film business because you gotta pay your dues. You gotta know the right people. After a while, a few years later, I end up getting on a travel film crew because I stayed in touch with this guy, Mark. He started me out as a PA, production assistant, and eventually I moved my way up to producing some of the stuff. And we do travel film videos, for governments and tourist boards and credit cards and things like that, which as a 20-some-year-old was a great gig because you travel around, you don't have a lot of responsibilities or obligations, you're having fun, you're seeing the world, you're making a little bit of money. And that was in the mid to late 80s. And then comes the early 90s. Chile in Latin America had a government with a dictator named Pinochet. Pinochet leaves, and as a result, they add new television stations and a new television network. And I thought, wow, this is a great idea because they need content. I'm going to fly down, talk to the production people we know in Chile because we did some filming there with Eastern Airlines. And I'm going to set up a meeting to this new television network and present myself as an American producer and pitch a game show. I ripped off an idea from a show in the U.S. And within a couple of months, we had a game show in Chile on TV for the younger demographic. Again, opportunity. New country, new television stations. They don't have any content. They need content. So there I was. And it did really well. That was the next entrepreneurial venture or opportunity that I took advantage of. Which, of course, connecting the dots when I look back led to, of course, the next. Because when I'm in Chile, they bring down this new nonlinear edit system. And I thought, that is the coolest thing ever. You don't have to cut and splice film with a razor blade. You mean you could do this stuff on a computer in like a word processor, cut and paste stuff? I thought that was really cool. And then somebody hands me a CD-ROM and they give me a virtual tour where on the computer, I can look up and down and all around. And I thought, wow. I'm going to go do a production company where I don't have to travel with a bunch of guys and all this luggage, and I'm going to produce virtual tours for travel industry. Loved it. So I'm out there. I set up a company called World Travelvision. We're one of the first companies to do 360s for hotels and destinations. We give them CD-ROMs. They take them to trade shows and conferences and promote their service, their product. Eventually, now we're talking mid to late 90s, they say, how do we get these virtual tours on this new worldwide? I don't know, send them a CD-ROM. No, they don't know what to do with it. There are no standards. I'm like, all right, let me see what I can do to help. Now, mind you, I know nothing about technology. So I say, okay, let's see. I got to find a way to link virtual tours to these travel websites. Let me hire somebody. So we first produce virtual tours, then we produce and we deliver virtual tours to the travel websites. And eventually I find out, well, pictures are a problem too, because those initial systems had rate and availability, but never had photos. I mean, you go to a brick and mortar travel agency decades ago, and they only had cryptic green screen text, right? So they needed photos, and the photos were put in a different database, and they'd upload them separately, and it was the wild, wild west. So again, opportunity. So we go from virtual tour production distribution, to virtual tour production distribution with photos, and then we get rid of the production, and then we get rid of the virtual tours, and eventually, 25 years later, if you go on any travel website now and you see pictures of hotels and resorts around the world on any travel website, they will have come from that company that I developed. I sold it years ago, but that was the technology play. If you would have said 30, 40 years ago, hey, you're going to build and sell a technology company, I would have thought you were smoking some wacky tobacco or something.
Okay, so I can ask the questions for the listeners here. That all didn't happen in a straight line, Henry.
No.
That you just didn't wake up and go, oh, here's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of that, and you sat at home, you had your feet up on the desk, and this stuff all started happening. There's failure in there. There's some trial and tribulation in there. There's some financial strain. There's lost night's sleep, all of those kind of things. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because there's a lot of people out there that would love to do what you're doing, and they've talked themselves out of even starting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the key. First of all, if you're into a space and you keep your eyes open, I would say yes to every single opportunity until I found one that I think I could win at, and then say no. And I'll give you an example. Virtual tour production was great, but eventually any kid with a camera and a computer is a competitor, and it's a race to the bottom, right? Now, what happens is along the way you realize, wow, there's an opportunity. Yeah, nobody's doing that. I could do that. Or I can solve this problem, which is a big deal these days. It's like if there's a problem that you can solve or that you can simplify, we do it in 5 steps, I can do it in 2. Really? Wow. Okay. So along the way, I didn't know anything about travel business. I would produce films. It was a very, beginning, middle, and end kind of closed circuit, right? And then starting a business through virtual tours, it was similar. You'd have to call and say, hey, can I produce virtual tours? And in the beginning, nobody wanted virtual tours. Eventually, when they started asking about distribution, I look at these tour operators that are selling the Caribbean and Mexico, and I thought, Cancun has a lot of resorts. I call the top 30 hotels in Cancun. And I say, listen, I'm going to be there shooting for somebody else, which was a lie. I will go down and shoot your hotel for free. And if you like it, you pay for the virtual tours. If you don't, you owe me nothing. And most of them said, yeah, we'll do that. And out of the 27 hotels that I ended up shooting, 24 of them said yes, they would buy them. So it was a gamble that paid off. And then eventually they wanted those tours distributed, which was really where the money was. It was the ongoing distribution that they pay every month, not a one-time fee. So again, opportunities, living on the edge, taking a gamble, putting it out there. Then starting the tech company, that was even more challenging because I don't know anything about technology. I got to connect with these people. I got to be hanging around for a while. You're talking years for people to trust. Who are you? You want me to do what with you? And I've never heard of you, right? So I mortgaged my house. I paid for the technology and the employees. I did a deal with the tech guys. I sold a piece of the company and then I bought it back. So there were a lot of times where I had been on the edge. My house was fully tapped out on the line of credit. I had to pay the employees. There were a couple of times I didn't even know if I was going to make it, and you kind of have to believe that you have something that will ultimately win and keep going. And it doesn't always work. I mean, I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. You need a little bit of luck. You need to be prepared. And you need to have a little bit of talent. So if you're not prepared and you're lucky, you're not going to see opportunity. If you're prepared and you're not lucky, you may not see opportunity. So you've got to prepare, build the foundation, build the processes, understand. Listen, in the beginning, David, people would say to me, you need to hire the right people. I don't even know. I can't even afford to pay myself. I don't even know how that can happen. You need KPIs. I was too embarrassed to ask them what the hell a KPI was, right? You need a vision. You need a culture. I don't know what any of this means, right? I didn't study anything in business. And so I literally went back to school in my fees to get my MBA in entrepreneurship because I wanted to learn, how do you really need to run a business? How do you build those foundational, structural foundations to grow and scale, right? What does lean management mean? What is a KPI? What do you mean vision? How do you get there? How do you do that? How do you lead? And all of those things took years of trial and error and reading books and schooling to figure it out.
Amazing. No, and it's good. So, what would you tell? Because we got to get to the really good part of the story. So if everybody's intrigued until now, because I hope you listen. I hope you listen to Henry's journey and some of his dreams that he had when he was younger.
Oh yeah, there's more to come.
And watch the we're only about 120 degrees into the full 360, so it's good. So talk to us, talk to the listeners a little bit about fear of failure, moments where you wanted to pull the plug, and you've got a house and you've got family, right? And you haven't talked about that, but mortgaging your house to the hilt and making monthly payments, and all of this being in a teeter-totter, that makes for some interesting pillow talk.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you, when I was younger and I would do things and I would take advantage of opportunities, it was because I didn't have far to fall. The failure was pretty non-existent. So what? I can sleep on somebody's couch. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a house. It's no big deal, right? Even when I went to Chile and producing the game shows, I'll give you a story. In Chile at the time, if you have a car and you want to park your car, there were people on the street with these red rags, and they would wave you in to tell you where to park on the street. They would pay for your parking meter. And when you go back, you pay for them for the meter and you give them a little tip. That was how they made money, right? And so I walked into the production offices one day and I had a red rag coming out of my back pocket. And people would say, "What's with the rag?" And I said, "If this doesn't work out, this is the only thing I have to fall back on." Because it's true, I didn't have a plan B. It's like, I'd be out there waving you in to park your car. So for me, it's this or nothing, right? The same thing with my last business, which was called Ice Portal, is I didn't really have a backup plan. Now, I certainly pivoted, as I mentioned, virtual tours to then virtual tour distribution and then photos and then eliminating stuff. So I learned how to say no to everything that wasn't eventually going to win. But there were a lot of things and struggles along the way that I was deathly afraid of waking up one day and realizing I can't pay my bills. I can't pay other people. I'm screwed. They're going to take my house. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was a couple of days away from bankruptcy. I had one competitor, multiple lawsuits. They were trying to sue us out of business. They had raised, tens of millions of dollars in VC money. And all they wanted to do was sue us out of business. And they were pretty damn close. We had $1 million settlement against us. I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't have $1 million to pay. There was one supplier that I delivered photos to that knew what was happening because he was aware that if that other competitor managed to be the only one, they would be a monopoly and they would essentially raise the prices. So he came in as a lifesaver. He paid that litigation fee for a piece of the company. He did really well in the end, but he kept me alive because I literally lost multiple nights of sleep thinking, all right, this is where it ends. I mean, I don't have a choice. This is the system. And, we got screwed. And I told him, and he's like, I don't like bullies. Yeah. So I asked for an appeal, which cost even more because, he needed to get the money together. And finally he did. And, here we are having this story. I don't want to give into the gory details, but that was the gist of it.
Oh, but people need to understand that there's gory details in all of this. When we get off here, I'm going to ask you to call my younger son and talk with him because he's getting ready to dip his toe into this, and I would appreciate it if you take 15 minutes out of your day just to chat
Absolutely.
with him. He's a bright guy. He called me today. He was a little bit anxious. I gave him some advice, but so you had a dream when you were younger to do stuff in film. And you wanted to do films, and you kind of hedged around the edges, right? Took some pictures, and you were the strong man, and carrying things around and kind of learning from. Basically, you're 20 years old learning from a 24-year-old, and out there in the world alone and unafraid. But you moved to LA where that's all structured and there's big names and big possibilities. And then some of the things you just described, and then you started raising dogs or chickens or.
So we'll go back before we go forward. So
Sure.
When I moved to Los Angeles with those dreams of producing and directing movies, I'm there having a good time because I'm getting a little bit of money from my video games and the game show. And my sister, who's in Miami, helping my father move, and he's got a manuscript sitting in the garage. And she asks him about it. And he says, oh, it's a tribute I wrote to a friend. It's, this story. She says, really? A love story? Dad? Can I read it? He's like, sure. She reads it. She loves it. She calls me up. She goes, oh my God, this would make such a great movie. You've got to read this. And I'm like, what? Dad, love story? Come on, this does not compute. And so she sends it to me. I read it. I couldn't put it down. I was in tears. I called my dad and I'm like, Dad, I love this. Can I buy the rights? He's like, sure. And I intended to make a movie out of it.
Are you going to tell us how much you sold it to you for?
Yeah, $1. Yeah.
I was going to say, cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Just to make it legal, you have to give them something.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I give it to a friend of mine who at the time was producing a movie in LA. And I go, listen, you got to read this because I feel a bit nepotistic. It's my dad.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And he goes, Henry, I'm in the middle of a movie. I got no rush. Take your time. 3 days later, he calls me up because I couldn't put it down. I love it. Let's do this. We're meant to do this. Well, I ended up going to Chile. He ended up getting into real estate, and we stayed in touch, right? Here we go, 40 years later, and I said, listen, I've sold my company. Let's go back. We always threatened that we're going to do this. It's been on the back burner all these years. So now the opportunity is different because back then, there were a handful of studios that controlled everything from production to distribution. Now the world has changed, right? There are more streamers, there are more opportunities. It's changing even more in the coming year or two with AI text to video, which is a whole nother wrinkle. Now, I said, let's go from the movie that we were going to do and let's create a series. So now you're going, what is all of this? So the book, I just published the book a couple of months ago. It's called The Reincarnation of Marie. It's based on a true story where a woman in the 1800s, she lived between 14 and 24. She died at 24 of tuberculosis. But in those 10 years, she wrote a journal. 2 years after her death, her mom publishes the journal and it becomes an international bestseller. It talks about things that women at the time didn't talk about, sexuality and love and masturbation and things like that. So 70 years later, guy picks up the book, reads the book, and he finds himself falling in love with the author. And then he finds himself in love with her and realizes, oh my God, this is crazy. I am in love with a dead person. I found my soulmate, but she died 70 years ago. And as he's realizing this, He leaves, then he comes back to Paris where he finds her reincarnated. That's kind of the very simplistic overview of the story. The series, however, does a far deeper dive into not just these two people's lives, but all of the other lives in those eras and how they intertwine in the present day. Whether it's reincarnation or slipping into another metaverse, or it's a hallucination in your own mind, we don't know, right? We just pose this like weird question of how do these things happen? And do soulmates exist? And if they do, is love and hate two sides of the same coin? Do you always find them in every lifetime? And it's a lot of fascinating twists and turns to that. And so that's what's keeping me busy and out of trouble. Well, not so busy, but keeping me out of trouble now.
I don't know if you'll ever stay out of trouble. You're the guy that you're the guy that got on the plane and went to Honduras with a crazy former Marine and the pistols and machetes, and you can't make that up. Have you written a book?
Yeah. Yeah, but now, of course, as you're older, you get a little bit more conservative about doing stupid things like that, even though I'll be off to Patagonia and glaciers in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we missed Patagonia. It was about, I guess, a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years now. We went to the jungles of Borneo and crawled around there and went and, see where orangutans live on the only place on the planet, and the proboscis monkeys, and getting out on the rivers in the middle of the night and spotlighting creatures that you probably wouldn't want to see any point in time.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing stuff. But have you written a book, Henry?
I only wrote one book, which was really a self-serving promotion for my business. It was called How to Sell Travel on the Internet. But that was really because I wanted to do some speeches at conferences and trade shows.
Yeah.
And it was I'm an author.
The book sucked, or the speaking sucked?
No, the book sucked. The speaking was good. I had figured that out, but I wanted to. People would say, "Would you do it?" Yeah, I wrote this book, How to Sell Travel on the Internet. I'm an expert, right? So anything you can do as a entrepreneur to promote yourself, especially these days with all the different avenues you've got in social media. I mean, that didn't exist back then. I think is helpful.
Right. I don't disagree. So what do you have for our listeners out there? I want to talk more about your project. I want you to be able to promote it. We're going to do that when we send this out to the world. But I really want you to, just like I told you, I'll pick up the phone and talk to my kid. He'll talk to you too. He's got an amazing story. He's 29 and he's done an awful lot. He's been in Washington D.C. basically the last 6 years and working on Capitol Hill and he's done. Oh yeah, and he was in fact they sent him home from work early on January 6th when all that went down, and he's got an amazing story about that type of stuff too. Him and his fiance, and yeah. But I drug him around the world. He's a world travel kid, and he understands things. But he's getting ready to dip his toe into stuff. But wrapping all of this up for the listeners, and then kind of maybe a little lead into to what you want us to know about how to find you, how to find your work, and promote all that. Some words of wisdom. Because my book, the first book I wrote, is titled Giving Back. The reason is because I woke up one day and thought, holy cow, how blessed I've been to have the life that I've had up until this point in time. And I'm still living it. And I just have all of these nuggets. And so you can go to your grave with all the nuggets and be the cool guy, or you can share them and help other people out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm happy to talk to your son as well, because I do coach small businesses for free simply because I didn't know what I was doing then. And I wish people would understand certain concepts. But, basic stuff like, first of all, as I had mentioned earlier, look for the opportunities. Are you solving a problem? And this is a business sense, right?
Right.
Whatever you do, enjoy it or find an opportunity, even if you don't enjoy it, that you think you can win at. Always say yes in the beginning, right? Because, in the beginning, you're a whore for nickels. You'll take anything just to make a couple of bucks and pay the bills. Eventually, when you find the things that you think you can do really well and beat the competition, you need to say no to everything else and just work on that, right? It's a fine line on tipping where you go at the beginning of the other. The other thing I would say is it doesn't happen quickly. Wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Understand what those foundational elements for creating a process and the KPIs to know what your health is, key performance indicators. And then you got to be prepared. You got to be lucky if you want to see that opportunity. You know, at the end of the day, I see these people that read in the paper, these guys from Instagram started a business, a year later they sold it for $1 billion. That's rarer than lightning in a bottle.
Right.
There are so many things you can do. First, you got to enjoy it. Second, you got to understand that it's not easy. You know, these things where people understand or think, yeah, I can take off when I want to take off and do what I want and make all kinds of money. You'll be the first one in, the last one out, and the last one to get paid.
Every day. It's like raising a kid that never gets past the age of 4.
Yeah. You know, that sense of entitlement we were talking about earlier, I think it's even more challenging now because the employees after COVID are like, you know, I don't want to work in an office. And, you know, I'm talking to another business guy and he's telling me that one of his salespeople didn't make a sales call. And he goes, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I was at the grocery store at 11 o'clock in the morning. Like, what? You were supposed to be working. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, this is kind of the mindset. So how do you get everybody on board to row in the same direction and to buy into the dream? It's not easy. And you really have to have a clear understanding of how you're going to get from A to B. And sometimes the path moves, you know, like driving from Miami to New York. Sometimes the road's closed. You got to go make a detour. But you know, you want to end up in New York, right? That's kind of the idea. I think the biggest takeaways is also be really grateful. Again, another story. When I was in Chile, I was making pretty good money. And I thought, you know what? If I did really well in Chile, I'd have to live in a house with barbed wire around it. Or if I made real good money, I would have to have a guard and people worried about kidnapping my kids. You know what? I would rather live in suburbia USA as a middle-class American and not worry and have those stresses. True story. So I moved back because the money wasn't the issue. It was basic infrastructure things and safety and security that I was looking at. Right?
Yeah,
so
basically right.
Here.
I had a young guy on that's he's podcasting. That's his business. And he left a very lucrative, job. He was doing really well. And he said, gosh, I had a full bank account. There wasn't, I wasn't wanting for much. I was a young guy doing well. And he goes, and I was the most miserable, empty human being ever. And, his saying is passion first, profit later. And I liked that when he said that because I think that as humans we're capable of doing a lot of things and being creative. But I could probably find something in your office and mess around with it long enough that we could probably sell it and make money. We could just figure something out.
Yeah,
but would we enjoy it?
Yeah, and if the passion is there, you will do it well. If you don't have the passion, you're not doing it well. You're dialing it in, and there are other people who may have a passion and doing it better, and they're winning. Right?
That's right.
You have a passion and that's what you want to do. I know people say, well, I want to do music or art but sometimes you got to do other things that are secondary because you got to pay bills.
Right.
That too.
Yeah. I love it. This is great. So give us the skinny. Where can we find you and the websites and the movie and all of it?
Well, I wish the movie were out, but it's really simple. There's a website called mariethestory.com, and it has information about, obviously, the book, where to buy it. It has information on the author, which is my father. He died 14 years ago. And it has information on the series that we now call Slippin', which is a play on slipping through time. And then contact information is also on there, as well as my LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah. I love it. So if people reach out to you, you said, no, I don't want 10,000 people. Not that I have 10,000 listeners yet, but we're working on it. I don't want 10,000 people hitting you up and saying, hey, you do free small business consultations. But if people reach out to you, what are the kind of things that you're willing to entertain, that you want them to ask, even if it's just a question?
If somebody has a legitimate small business and they're interested and they say, listen, help me out, help me understand what are the things that you did, I'm happy to chat. I think that at this stage, your giving back thing is, listen, what I know, I didn't know 30 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
When I read the book Traction by Gino Wickman, I was like, oh my God, the light turned on. The backdoor password to our technology was Gino Wickman, the author of the book. I mean, I get it now. So I tell people, it is not that difficult, but in the sense that what to do, but you have to put those wheels in place.
Sure.
You can't just expect the business to run. I would hear my father saying things like, meetings are a waste of time. So I didn't have meetings, like an idiot. I didn't know how to structure a meeting, what
All
that
right.
meant, how to make a meeting productive,
All
right?
right.
So, you have to understand and learn those things in order to move forward. Otherwise, without a foundation, there's no way to scale. And then you also have to be clear on what it is that makes me different. What's my USP, my unique sales proposition, and how am I going to make money? And for that matter, what's the long-term goal? Am I going to sell it? Am I going to give it to the family? What's the deal? So as long as you kind of have a sense of where you're going and what you're doing, you can get there. Feverishly writing. I see that in the background.
I do. I'm going to change this a little bit. Everybody usually names their podcast when they talk, and I hadn't really written a whole bunch down. That caught my thing, but it's going to be something like "Out of the Jungle: An Entrepreneur's Guide to Success." So that's probably what it's going to be. Out of the jungle. I just need to figure out what the
advice you want to give somebody. If you want to be a good entrepreneur, go to the jungle for 2 months. I don't
know. Well, that's right. But the way the podcast opens is awesome, and so out of the jungle is going to be the way. Well, I appreciate you on a variety of levels. I hope that we get a chance to do this again, Henry. As people that are down to earth, have done it from the ground up and remained humble in life, and humble enough that they can communicate things at the 100 and 101 level for those of us that have been to college, and they can actually make it actionable. Far too often you get in rooms and people got, their collars are too stiff, their ties are too tight, and they talk at a level that's unconsumable, and it just kind of runs you off. And successful people that are not overly arrogant or narcissistic are like gold in our society, because far too often the other case is what's prevalent. So
without a doubt. And listen, I tell this to people all the time. I'm a white guy born in the U.S. in the 60s. How badly could I fuck that up? Right? If I was a black kid born in Somalia, we would not be having this conversation. And that's the sad reality. Like Warren Buffett says, he won the ovarian lottery, and that's the truth. But people think I'm so smart, I did this. No, you were at the right place at the right time with the right idea. You may have a little bit more tenacity than others, but you would not have made it in other situations. Let's be clear. So be grateful for that.
Amen. For a guy who actually lived in Somalia for a while during a really critical time, I can totally relate to that. Yeah, everybody's starting point's a little bit different in life. Well, brother, thanks so much. Be blessed.